"But, Severin—" "But it is so," I said, "and just for that reason—" "For that reason you would," she smiled roguishly. "Have I guessed it?" "Be your slave," I exclaimed, "be your unrestricted property, without a will of my own, of which you could dispose as you wished, and which would therefore never be a burden to you. While you drink life at its fullest, while surrounded by luxury, you enjoy the serene happiness and Olympian love. I want to be your servant, put on and take off your shoes." "You really aren't so far from wrong," replied Wanda, "for only as my slave could you endure my loving others. Furthermore, the freedom of enjoyment of the ancient world is unthinkable without slavery. It must give one a feeling of like unto a god to see a man kneel before one and tremble. I want a slave. Do you hear, Severin?" "Am I not your slave? Then listen to me," said Wanda excitedly, seizing my hand. "I want to be yours as long as I love you." "A month? Perhaps even two." "And then?" "Then you become my slave." "And you?" "I? Why do you ask? I am a goddess, and sometimes I descend from my Olympian heights to you, softly, very softly, and secretly." "But what does it all mean?" said Wanda, resting her head in both hands with her gaze lost in the distance. "A golden fancy which never can become true." An uncanny brooding melancholy seemed shed over her entire being. I have never seen her like that. "Why unachievable?" I began. "Because slavery doesn't exist any longer." "Then we will go to a country where it exists, to the Orient, to Turkey," I said eagerly. "You would, Severin, in all seriousness?" Wanda replied. Her eyes burned. "Yes, in all seriousness. I want to be your slave," I continued. "I want your power over me to be sanctified by law. I want my life to be in your hands. I want nothing that could protect or save me from you. Oh, what a voluptuous joy when once I feel myself entirely dependent upon your absolute will, your whim, at your beck and call! And then what happiness when at some time you deign to be gracious, and the slave may kiss the lips which mean life and death to him!" I knelt down and leaned my burning forehead against her knee. "You are talking as in a fever," said Wanda agitatedly, "and you really love me so endlessly." She held me to her breast and covered me with kisses. "You really want it?" "I swear to you now by God and my honour that I shall be your slave, wherever and whenever you wish it, as soon as you command," I exclaimed, hardly master of myself. "And if I take you at your word?" said Wanda. "Please do." "All this appeals to me," she said then. "It is different from anything else, to know that a man who worships me, and whom I love with all my heart, is so wholly mine, dependent on my will and caprice, my possession and slave, while I—" She looked strangely at me. "If I should become frightfully frivolous, you are to blame," she continued. "It almost seems as if you were afraid of me already. But you have sworn." "And I shall keep my oath." "I shall see to that," she replied. "I am beginning to enjoy it. And, heaven help me, we won't stick to fancies now. You shall become my slave, and I shall try to be Venus in furs." I thought that at last I knew this woman, understood her, and now I see I have to begin at the very beginning again. Only a little while ago her reaction to my dreams was violently hostile, and now she tries to carry them into execution with the soberest seriousness. She has drawn up a contract according to which I give my word of honour and agree under oath to be her slave, as long as she wishes. With her arm around my neck she reads this unprecedented, incredible document to me. The end of each sentence she punctuates with a kiss. "But all the obligations in the contracts are on my side," I said, teasing her. "Of course," she replied with great seriousness. "You cease to be my lover, and consequently I am released from all duties and obligations towards you. You will have to look upon my favors as pure benevolence. You no longer have any rights, and no longer can lay claim to any. There can be no limit to my power over you. Remember that you won't be much better than a dog, or some inanimate object. You will be mine, my plaything, which I can break into pieces whenever I want an hour's amusement. You are nothing. I am everything. Do you understand?" She laughed and kissed me again, and yet a sort of cold shiver ran through me. "Won't you allow me a few conditions?" I began. "Conditions?" She contracted her forehead. "Oh! You're afraid already, or perhaps you regret. But it is too late now. You have sworn. I have your word of honor. But let me hear them." "First of all, I should like to have it included in our contract that you will never completely leave me, and then that you will never give me over to the mercies of any of your admirers." "But, Severin!" exclaimed Wanda, with her eyes full of emotion and with tears in her eyes, "how can you imagine that I, and you, a man who loves me so absolutely, who puts himself so entirely in my power—" She halted. "No, no," I said, covering her hands with kisses. "I don't fear anything from you that might dishonor me. Forgive me the ugly thought." Wanda smiled happily, leaned her cheek against mine, and seemed to reflect. "You have forgotten something," she whispered coquettishly. "The most important thing." "A condition?" "Yes, that I must always wear my furs," exclaimed Wanda. "But I promise you I'll do that, anyhow, because they give me a despotic feeling, and I shall be very cruel to you. Do you understand?" "Shall I sign the contract?" I asked. "Not yet," said Wanda. "I shall first add your conditions, and the actual signing won't occur until the proper time and place." "In Constantinople?" "No. I have thought things over. What special value would there be in owning a slave where everyone owns slaves? What I want is to have a slave, I alone, here in our civilized sober Philistine world, and a slave who submits hopelessly to my power solely on account of my beauty and personality, not because of law, of property rights, or compulsions. This attracts me. But at any rate we will go to a country where we are not known, and where you can appear before the world as my servant without embarrassment. Perhaps to Italy, to Rome or Naples." We were sitting on Wanda's ottoman. She wore her ermine jacket. Her hair was loose and felt like a lion's mane down her back. She clung to my lips, drawing my soul from my body. My head whirled, my blood began to seethe, my heart beat violently against hers. "I want to be absolutely in your power, Wanda," I exclaimed suddenly, seized by that frenzy of passion when I can scarcely think clearly or decide freely. "I want to put myself absolutely at your mercy, for good or evil, without any condition, without any limit to your power." While saying this I had slipped from the ottoman, and lay at her feet looking up at her with drunken eyes. "How beautiful you are!" she exclaimed. "Your eyes half broken in ecstasy fill me with joy, carry me away. How wonderful your look would be if you were being beaten to death, in the extreme agony. You have the eye of a martyr." Sometimes, nevertheless, I have an uneasy feeling about placing myself so absolutely, so unconditionally into a woman's hands. Suppose she did abuse my passion, her power? Well then, I would experience what has occupied my imagination since my childhood, what has always given me the feeling of seductive terror, a foolish apprehension. It will be a wanton game she will play with me, nothing more. She loves me, and she is good, a noble personality, incapable of a breach of faith. But it lies in her hands. If she wants to, she can. What a temptation in this doubt, this fear! Now I understand Manon Lescaut and the poor Chevalier.